Long night?
A short one. Plagued by spirits. A hell of a way to spend the Sabbath, fellas.
Here in support of a friend. His leading lady is making a mid-career adjustment.
I'm on my way over. Any notes from the oversight tent?
Who was that again?
Just a writer.
Just a writer. This dismissive label hangs like a dark cloud over Herman for the rest of the film, which is rather counterintuitive if you think about it. I mean, aren't writers the ones who literally control the story? The driving question of the film is less who really wrote Citizen Kane, and more, how much power does a writer really have? In true Kane fashion, Mank is a spiral story, flashing back and forth between the early 1930s and 40s of Herman becoming disillusioned with the politics of the studio system. Look, I know this movie is a lot. Names and references fly at you faster than Mank can down a bottle of liquor, but it's my contention that focusing on this question, whether or not writers have real power, will highlight the driving tension of the film and reveal how displays of artifice and fiction can be weaponized and leveraged for power. Which brings me to William Randolph Hearst. Now, whether you know that name or not, what's important for understanding this story is that Hearst owned writers. Well, to be more accurate, he owned newspapers. He had power, and he used it. Notice here how Mank shuffles along to keep pace, while Hearst sits above him in a car while it's carried along on a track. They are obviously not on the same playing field. Now, don't be distracted by the glossy studio background. The real setting of this film is the Depression. Mank may be complicit in the studio system. He certainly doesn't suffer like some others, but he still has a writer's idealism, an idealism that recoils at his employer's faux sympathy towards those with no money.
This is a business where the buyer gets nothing for his money but a memory. What he bought still belongs to the man who sold it. That's the real magic of the movies, and don't let anybody tell you different.
For Mayer and Hearst, business is a performing art.
I am asking to roll back salaries.
This is a performance, an artifice of display for business.
I won't break up this family over something like money.
And big business uses fiction to keep the haves in charge of the have-nots.
How'd I do, Ben?
It was great, Mr. Mayor.
Mank sees this performance for what it is, and it underscores a mild loathing he has for these men. But there's more. Louis Mayer and William Randolph Hearst use Mank's own wit against him.
You have everything it takes right here.
By strengthening Frank Merriam's bid for governor as he runs against Upton Sinclair. Hey, that's
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
And they do this through artificial ad campaigns, aka fake news. And in an unfortunate irony, the fictitious ad campaigns that propelled Merriam's campaign were actually inspired by the clever words of Mank himself.
You can make the world swear King Kong is 10 stories tall and Mary Pickford a virgin at 40. Yet you can't convince starving voters that a turncoat socialist is a menace to everything Californians hold dear?
Which brings us to the rosebud of this story. When John Houseman asks Herman why he's going after Hearst, Mank replies,
John, are you familiar with the parable of the organ grinder's monkey?
This allegory is the knife twisted into the heart of Mank, especially when you consider from whom Herman first heard the parable.
Are you familiar with the parable of the organ grinder's monkey?
For when Mank drunkenly spins a cutting tale about a modern-day Don Quixote who sees himself become everything he once hated, the story literally spewing from his lips like vomit, Mank is reminded by Hearst who the monkey really is in this story. From where Hearst stands, writers are merely puppets, convinced that their strings move the puppeteers above them. Now notice that this scene is actually interrupted in the middle by a confrontation in the 40s between Mank and Orson Wells over who gets screenwriting credit for Citizen Kane. For many viewers, this moment has sparked an age-old debate about the character of Orson Wells. But this debate seems beside the point. After all, this is a movie told from the perspective of Herman Mankiewicz. So it makes dramatic sense that a story about the power or lack thereof of a writer would see Wells as just one more powerful person ready to steal their story. For God's sake, look at Orson's introduction. He glides into the unfocused frame, silhouetted in a dark coat as if death himself were visiting Mank. It would appear this film is trying to capture Wells for what he represents, his dramatic shadow. But the real problem with the debate surrounding the portrayal of Orson Wells is this. Mank is not a story about authorship. It's about ownership. At the beginning of the 30s, Mank is a contented court jester. He prances and stumbles through the studio, juggling and tossing story ideas as if it were a game. MGM owns his stories, and that is all fine and dandy for him. That is, until his dreams are used to fuel his own personal nightmares. Mank's ideals mean nothing when his greatest strength, his words, are owned by those in direct opposition to his beliefs. Which is why the Herman Mankiewicz of this story fights the Titan Wells. Because he's finally owning his own story, and he won't let anyone else's name steal it. Mank makes it clear by basing Charles Foster Kane on William Randolph Hearst that he isn't anyone's dancing monkey. This act is heroic in one sense, but also tragic. His friends and colleagues warned him what would happen if he continued with his script about Hearst, and everything they feared came to pass. And all of this fails to mention the meta-narrative of the artifice of the film itself. David Fincher, using every facet of movie magic he can muster, uses deft digital trickery to make this film look as era-appropriate as possible. But this, of course, is a fiction, a fact that the script title overlays draw attention to at every scene change. One could say writers really don't have much power. Their words and ideas can be tainted by the artifice of display, strained and twisted in any actor's mouth for any devilish purpose. Is it worth it to have a little bit of power within the system, if it means being complicit in their lies? Mank's friend Shelley Metcalf didn't think so. Mank, as he clutches his Oscar in the final moments of the film, reminds us that he was, by all accounts, defeated. And yet here we are, many decades later, still talking about the writer of Citizen Kane.